Imagine sitting in a leather seat, sipping vintage champagne, and looking out a small window to see the dark purple edge of space and the physical curvature of the Earth. You are traveling at 1,350 miles per hour, faster than the speed of sound and faster than the rotation of the Earth itself. If you left London at sunset, you would actually arrive in New York in the late afternoon. You are flying faster than the sun. For nearly 3 decades, this was a daily reality. The Concorde was an absolute marvel of human engineering, a joint venture between Britain and France that defied the limits of commercial aviation. But on 25th July 2000, that dream violently ended. Air France Flight 4590 struck a piece of debris on the runway in Paris, erupting into a massive fireball before crashing into a hotel and killing 113 people. While the fiery crash was the beginning of the end, it wasn't the only thing that killed the Concorde. The truth is, the world's most famous supersonic airliner was doomed by its own physics. It was an engineering triumph, but an absolute financial disaster. It guzzled astronomical amounts of fuel, its cabin was cramped and loud, and it created a shockwave so destructive that governments banned it from flying over land. How did we achieve the impossible dream of supersonic travel in the 1960s, only to completely abandon it in the 21st century? To understand the complete story of the Concorde, we have to look back at the height of the Cold War, when three global superpowers raced to conquer the sky. In the 1950s and 60s, the aviation industry believed that supersonic travel was the inevitable future, but building a passenger plane that could fly at Mach 2 was incredibly expensive. Realizing they couldn't afford it alone, the governments of Britain and France signed an international treaty in 1962 to share the costs and build the aircraft together. They named it Concorde, a word meaning agreement or harmony. But they weren't alone. The United States heavily subsidized Boeing to build the massive Boeing 2707, a supersonic concept that was eventually cancelled due to rising costs. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union aggressively rushed to beat the West, famously creating the Tupolev Tu-144, which the Western press nicknamed the Concorde. The Soviets actually won the race to the sky, flying the Tu-144 2 months before the Concorde. But the Soviet plane was heavily flawed, notoriously loud, and suffered two catastrophic crashes, leading to its quick and quiet retirement. The Concorde was left alone to dominate the supersonic market. To fly at Mach 2, twice the speed of sound, the Concorde required engineering solutions that had never been used on commercial planes. The most famous feature was its droop snoot. Because the Concorde had a massive delta-shaped wing, it had to tilt its nose extremely high into the air during takeoff and landing to maintain lift. But this steep angle meant the pilots couldn't see the runway. So engineers designed a mechanical nose that hydraulically lowered by 12.5 degrees during landing, giving the pilots a clear view, and then raised back up into a perfect aerodynamic needle for supersonic flight. To reach Mach 2, it used four massive Rolls-Royce Olympus turbojet engines equipped with afterburners, a technology usually reserved for fighter jets. Raw fuel was injected directly into the exhaust, creating a massive boost of thrust and deafening roar. The plane also had to battle extreme heat. At 1,350 miles per hour, the air friction on the nose of the plane reached 127 degrees Celsius. The heat was so intense that the entire metal airframe of the Concorde actually stretched and expanded by up to 10 inches during flight. Engineers had to build expansion gaps into the cabin walls to prevent the plane from tearing itself apart. Despite the brilliant engineering, the Concorde crashed into an invisible wall of physics, the sonic boom. When a plane breaks the sound barrier, it pushes air molecules aside faster than they can get out of the way, creating a massive continuous shock wave. On the ground, this sounds like a violent explosion. It shattered windows and terrified livestock. Because of this, the United States and other nations banned the Concorde from flying supersonic over land. This instantly destroyed the plane's economic potential. It could no longer fly lucrative routes like New York to Los Angeles. It was restricted almost entirely to transatlantic flights over the ocean. Then, in 1973, the global oil crisis hit. Fuel prices skyrocketed. The Concorde was an absolute gas guzzler, burning 4 times more fuel per passenger than a Boeing 747. Airlines panicked. Almost all of the original 100 orders from global airlines were abruptly cancelled. In the end, only 14 Concordes ever went into commercial service, purchased exclusively by the state-backed airlines of Britain and France. Because the airlines couldn't make money selling standard tickets, they pivoted. The Concorde was marketed as the ultimate luxury experience for the global elite. A round-trip ticket from London to New York cost over $12,000 in modern money. The passenger list was a daily roster of celebrities, politicians, and billionaires. However, the reality inside the cabin was surprisingly cramped. To remain aerodynamic, the fuselage was extremely narrow. There were only 4 seats across, the headroom was tiny, and the windows were the size of a passport. But passengers didn't care. They were fed caviar, poured endless champagne, and they crossed the Atlantic in just 2 hours and 52 minutes. For 24 years, the Concorde maintained a perfect safety record. But on 25th July 2000, a bizarre chain of events led to a tragedy. Just minutes before Air France Flight 4590 began its takeoff roll at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, a Continental Airlines DC-10 had taken off on the exact same runway. As the DC-10 lifted off, a small titanium metal strip fell off its engine cowling and landed on the tarmac. When the Concorde accelerated down the runway at 200 miles per hour, its front tire ran directly over that titanium strip. The tire violently exploded. A massive, heavy chunk of rubber was flung upwards, slamming into the underside of the left wing with the force of an artillery shell. The impact created a shock wave inside the fuel tank, bursting the tank open. Jet fuel poured out and instantly ignited. The Concorde lifted off, trailing a massive plume of fire. The engines choked and failed. Unable to gain altitude or speed, the aircraft rolled and crashed into a hotel in the town of Gonesse, killing all 100 passengers, 9 crew members, and 4 people on the ground. The crash shattered the aura of the Concorde. The entire fleet was immediately grounded, and engineers spent millions redesigning the fuel tanks with Kevlar lining to prevent future punctures. The Concorde finally returned to the skies in November 2001, but the world had changed. Just 2 months earlier, the 11th September attacks had devastated the global aviation industry. Premium business travel plummeted. Suddenly, corporations were no longer willing to pay $12,000 for a 3-hour flight. Combined with the soaring maintenance costs of a 30-year-old airframe and Airbus's decision to stop manufacturing replacement parts, British Airways and Air France accepted the inevitable. On 24th October 2003, the Concorde flew its final commercial flight, landing at London Heathrow to the cheers of thousands of spectators. Today, you can only see the Concorde sitting silently in museums. It stands as a magnificent, flawed masterpiece, a rare moment in human history, where technology actually took a step backward and we surrendered the ability to fly faster than the sun.